Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Welcome back to another episode of the AA Podcast. I am Ashley Olson.
And I am Andrea Crane.
We're going to be talking about something that we are both, well, I should say, Andrea is very passionate about, and I am learning to be passionate about. It's something that has recently sparked my interest, and honestly, Andrea is the expert in this realm.
Yes, with all 2 years of experience that I have. Thank you.
2 years more than I, but yeah, so we're excited to get into this episode. But before we do that, we're sharing our weekly Bible verse with you. Mine is coming from Proverbs 28:19, and it says, "Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies will have their fill of poverty."
So for once, you had the snarky Bible verse.
I know.
Okay, mine, I'll play the straight man today. Mine was Genesis 1:12. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good.
That's awesome. All right. So if you haven't gotten the hint by now, we're talking about gardening today.
Woohoo!
And we are talking about gardening today because we're going to be talking about what I guess you'd call putting your garden to bed, which I had never heard that term before until Andrea told me. But basically, it's winterizing your garden.
Okay, to be honest, I think I've heard that somewhere before. That's just kind of what I call it. So maybe I made it up, but I don't know.
It honestly sounds very fairy tale-ish and kind of
I know.
romantic, so
Yeah.
I think we could run with it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm down with that. And I do have a bunch of fairy lights in my garden that my husband hates because they come on every night. And he said it looks like a circus out there. So he's he's not a big fan, but I am. So anyway. Yeah.
Well,
So
yeah.
we talked about you know, uh, does this is this in keeping with the message of our podcast? And honestly, um, I feel like this has become such a big and coveted part of my life. Um, I can't tell you the amount of peace and solitude and just rest and refreshment that I get from being outside in the midst of the things that I've grown. It's so exciting in the middle of summer to run out there every single day and see like what's taking over where and what's turning colors, and I have new fruit and new plants and new veggies over here, and it's just super super exciting, I think. And I think there's a reason why there's this massive resurgence in interest in gardening and being self-sufficient and growing your own food. And I don't, I have a rather large yard, but I don't use all of that yard for growing. I have a very prescribed area that I grow food in, where my gardens are, and it's not that big, frankly. And I grew a ton of food this year, so took extra down to the church food bank. I gave to neighbors and friends, and so yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff that you can do in a small space.
I love that. And if you have not already, go follow Andrea on her Instagram because she has done
Yes.
a lot of videos of her garden and talking about the different varieties of plants that she planted this year, which frankly, most of them I had never heard of before. I mean, there's squash, but she had like some freaking Spanish squash, of course. And then there was like
Oh,
all these other varieties of things that I had never heard of. I mean, I'm just
yeah.
plain Jane over here.
I
So
get I like poured through the seed catalogs in the winter. So that's like a really super fun winter activity is ordering your seed catalogs. And
Oh,
then I
yes.
like looking through for all the weird stuff and trying to grow that. So,
I don't think that's one of our questions, but maybe you could answer
mm,
maybe where you like to look for
gosh,
seeds.
that's a really good idea. And you know what? I am a huge fan of Snake River.
Okay.
But we will definitely put links in the show notes because there are some places. Mary's is another one. Mary's Heirloom Seeds. Um, those are the places where I get my seeds. They are small growers. They get their seeds from small small growers who do it right.
Oh,
And so
okay.
I like heirloom varieties because then I can save the seeds myself. And then in fact, there will be very few seeds that I need to purchase for next year's garden because I was able to save seeds from so many varieties of things this year. And if people are interested at all in gardening episodes, then that can definitely be an upcoming episode next year. We can talk about the different types of seed saving, which would really lend itself to a video. So yeah, we could do that
That would be
live.
awesome because I
Yeah.
have no idea how to do that. So
Yeah, it's so cool. It's just yeah. Anyway, I'm now a garden evangelist. So
I love
yeah.
it. Okay, so we're gonna kind of treat this episode more as me interviewing Andrea, just because she has way more experience than I do with gardening. I have attempted gardening maybe I would say I can think of 3 times in my life, and it was more on the cusp of, like, crossing fingers, hoping nothing dies. And, I remember the first garden that we did was in Wichita, and basically, I like to plant a salsa garden.
Oh
It's
yeah.
tomatoes, peppers, I don't even
Cilantro,
yeah,
onion.
cilantro, yeah, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And, distinctly remember not getting any tomatoes because my husky would go and steal them. He wouldn't eat them,
Oh.
he would just steal them and play them with them. He would throw them up in the air and
Oh.
yeah. So it was definitely a fight to get to the tomatoes before he did. But, and
Oh.
then the last couple times that I've attempted, I basically have done, um, pot
Oh, like
gardens.
container gardens.
Yeah, so we
Mhm.
did some container gardens in the mountains, which actually that did pretty well. I just did
Yeah.
some jalapenos and tomatoes that year. My jalapenos I thought were going to do awesome. I thought I had saved them from a really bad frost, a late frost
Uh,
that we had. It was
uh-huh.
like in June.
Uh,
And my tomatoes I thought I had killed. And come to find out, my jalapenos that looked amazing all died, and my
oh.
tomatoes, like, who I thought had literally looked like they were dead, like, were thriving. So,
Mm,
one thing that we're gonna get to is, like, knowing your zones and stuff, but
mhm.
we'll get to that in a little bit. So, all that to
Yeah.
say, I'm gonna just be asking Andrea some questions, and she's probably gonna be the one majority, talking, but, yeah, so I'm excited to get into this.
Okay.
Okay, so Andrea,
Yes.
can you explain the importance of preparing your garden for winter and what are the key benefits of doing it?
Well, so first of all, I wanna put this caveat out there. If there's anybody listening that's a master gardener, I'm
Yes.
not. So so you're literally, but if you're a noob and you don't know anything, then definitely I can help you. I can help you avoid some pitfalls. So I don't wanna come across like I am some big expert because this is literally my 2nd garden that I've really ever had. So, but I'm hoping people can learn from what I'm learning. And so yeah, the preparing the garden for winter. Yeah, I think there's several reasons why this is beneficial. One, it just helps you to prepare for the next planting season. So it makes it more efficient when you go to plant next year. And Ashley and I have a surprise episode coming up about winter sowing, which will be coming up later. Um, but when you have all of your beautiful winter sown plants, ready to go in like May of next year, then you've got these beautiful planting beds that are ready to receive the plants that you're going to put in them. So there's an efficiency there. Also, oh, go ahead.
Well, just not to give anything away too much because we're going to do a whole episode on this, but can you just give a brief description of what
Mm,
even winter sowing is? Because I had no idea.
yeah. Okay, so if you guys go to my Instagram and look at what my garden looks like this year, I am telling you, I did not purchase one plant this year. I grew all of that. And again, this is a total newbie. It was my first time winter sowing. Um, I bought seed packets for like $2 and $3 a piece, maybe $4 for some of the weird stuff. And I winter sowed it. And then I did not have to purchase one single plant this year. So I planted them all in milk cartons, and Ashley and I will be showing you all how to do that a little later, probably early spring, late winter. We'll be showing you guys how to do that. Um, but it is absolutely the way to go if you're interested in keeping costs down as well. Again, it just increases your self sufficiency. So you don't have to depend on someone else and you can grow whatever you want. So if you go down to Home Depot, they only have like one type of tomato or maybe
Hmm.
two, and there might be some things that you really like that you really want to try and nobody's growing them. And so yeah, it's just a way to really explode the number of varieties that you can plant. um so another reason, and this is honestly, it's just purely aesthetics. So when you get all of the plant matter put away and dealt with, and we'll talk about that a little later on, but when you get all of that put away and dealt with and you get your beds ready, it just gives you a nice aesthetic to look at over the winter. So winter's kind of bleak anyway. And so when you have some order to your garden after the explosion of life that happened in the summertime, I just like that real picturesque looking landscape out there that putting everything to bed kind of gives you.
Perfect.
Yeah. Oh, and then finally, let's see, keeping diseases down, that's a huge reason. Um, and so you want plant matter to have time to break down and improve the soil, which again we'll talk about a little later. But then also, you want to keep plant diseases down, and preparing the garden for winter helps you to not perpetuate plant diseases into the next growing season.
How would you know if you have plant diseases?
Oh, you know.
Oh, okay.
Stuff is dying. You've got like mildew on the leaves. You've
Mhm.
got yeah, you trust me,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are the essential tasks that is involved in putting your garden to bed for the winter?
Well, so the first thing that you need to decide is how you want to um how you want to go about preparing your garden beds. So I'll just tell you, I am not an in-ground gardener. I am a garden bed gardener. So I have
Yeah, you
raised
have raised
beds.
beds.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have raised beds. Some of them are not very tall. In fact, we'll put that in a future episode also. I have some favorite garden beds that are quite affordable, um, that are only like 2 feet and or maybe 2.5 feet and 1.5 feet off the ground, but they work beautifully. And then
Now,
I've got
I know
some.
the house came with garden beds,
Yeah, came with a couple that were kind
but
of
you added
trashy.
more?
Yeah, yeah. So we
Okay.
were able to keep three. Um, but I added, oh my gosh, I've probably added 15 or 18 beds to the, I know it's crazy. I'm a little out of control. So yeah, but I have a lot of garden beds, but I'm not an in-ground gardener. I can control the soil that way. I can control it also, like, you don't have to get down and crawl around on the ground. I have really bad knees, and so this is a lot easier for me to be able to get to all the spaces I need to get to in a raised bed. And I think the disease factor is much, much better in a
Mm,
raised bed. So, yeah, raised bed gardener. So you have to figure out, like, are you going to be a tiller, or are you going to be one of those people that just kind of leaves things? So I more and more I am leaning towards being someone who kind of leaves things for winter as much as I can, while still maintaining the aesthetic that I like. And I'll tell you how I do that. So one school of thought is that when you till everything in, so you come along and you either with a shovel or with, some kind of tilling rake, you go through and you literally dig into the soil and you overturn it so that the stuff, 6, 8, 12 inches down now becomes the stuff on the top.
mm,
Okay. Now, that's all well and good, and it gives you a really beautiful bed to look at. Like, you're left looking at this really dark beautiful soil, right? However, what you've done is completely disrupt the microbiome that's going on in the soil. So that network of fungus and bacteria, also you've got pollinators that are trying to overwinter in some of the plant mass. And so you've just completely disrupted that whole ecosystem. And the more reading that I'm doing, the more I'm coming to understand that that's a really important ecosystem. And you're actually seem to be better off if you just kind of leave things as much as you can. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't have to look like a mess. It really doesn't. You can still get your aesthetic look, and leave the ecology that remains alone. Um, and so one of the ways that I do that is, I don't necessarily leave a lot of plants at the top of the soil, but I don't yank them out of the ground either, because again, I don't want to disturb that ecology that has built up. So what I do is I'll go through, and the plants that I need to get rid of, like all of the dead plant matter, I will cut off at the surface. So just at ground level. Then I leave all the roots underneath, and those will decompose and add back into the nutrients that are in your soil. And you haven't disturbed anything by yanking all that stuff out of the ground. You haven't yanked out your beautiful compost and your topsoil. So it's just a really easy way to do it. Just cut them off at ground level. Now, the important thing is you want to burn or haul away in the garbage any plants that were infested. So if for instance, let's see, like my green beans, and peas, all of those were really, really super good and healthy this year. So I'm just going to cut them off at ground level. All of those leaves and stems are going to go into, I have a glorified compost pile. It's not really compost. I'll talk about this later. It is an area of great frustration and consternation for me. I'm bitter about it, but that's where I'm putting those things. And so all of the clean leaves I'll put in there. But all of my squash, all of my pumpkins, all of my melons, they all are very susceptible to diseases like powdery mildew. Again, you'll know if you have it. It looks like powder on your leaves. You want to burn that.
mm,
Also, things that have bug infestations like squash bug or squash vine borers, you want to burn that or haul it away also, because those suckers are so resilient, and they will hang out in your compost or trash pile, and they will reemerge the next year and infect your garden, and they're very efficient at doing that. So you want to make sure that you get rid of all of that stuff. And then finally, the last task that I'm going to do is to plant my garlic, because you plant garlic in the fall. So in the next week or two, I am going to get my garlic planted. Um, garlic,
Now, did you plant garlic this year?
I did. I planted it last fall and I harvested it this year. And I got a bunch of I got a bunch of garlic, and it's super tasty, and I was really proud of myself. Um but it's small.
Mm,
And so it's not ideal. So I didn't want to take those cloves and replant them. So what I did is I ordered all new seed garlic this year. Um, Now you're probably wondering, what is seed garlic, Andrea? Well, I'm about to tell you. So here's the deal. I live in a state where we're not allowed. It's literally illegal to plant grocery store garlic in the ground, because there's a lot of plant viruses, and also some bacterial disease that can come along with garlic, and they can, like, once they're in your ecosystem, it's very hard to claw that back. So
hmm.
I am not a fan of planting anything other than certified seed garlic. Now it's expensive. Oh, so let me tell you this first. So why did my garlic end up small? Well, I planted it in a bed in ground. So this is the only in ground plant that, like, produce that I had this last year. Um it was in a bed that I made that was under a plum tree, like a giant ornamental plum that's right by my house. So it got very little sun. It was protected from wind and things like that, but it got very little sun. And so I think that that is the issue. You want garlic to have at least 6 hours of sunlight a day. So next year or this fall, I'm going to be planting. I'm going to devote a whole bed to garlic. So so that said, I didn't want to plant the small bulbs because from small bulbs come more small bulbs, right?
Okay. So they
Um,
don't actually grow.
yeah. So you want to get like the largest cloves that you can, and those are the ones that you want to plant. So each little clove will create a whole bulb. So you know how you get a bulb of garlic at the grocery store and it's got probably, I don't know, like 8 to 10 little cloves around in it. Each one of those cloves, you break it apart. You don't take off the paper. You just break the cloves apart and then you plant it with the pointy side up. And that
Hmm,
is it. That's all you do. And then it just grows and then you harvest it like in June.
that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah. So what I did is, I checked with my local nurseries, and I would suggest that anyone out there who wants to plant garlic, make sure you know your state's rules about it. But even if you're in a state where, we looked briefly before the show, and Ashley and I couldn't find any rules or regulations about garlic in Colorado, but I do know in Idaho we can't plant anything other than seed garlic. So I would suggest that you get a good mix of seed garlic, get some hard neck, get some soft neck, and then see what you like better. I love the hard neck garlic because it forms scapes. And if you know me, you know I love me some garlic scapes. So those are the curly things that grow at the top of garlic, and you really can only get them at a farmer's market.
That's
So
awesome. I
yeah,
did not know. I did not know
you
that.
didn't know about garlic scapes? Okay, so garlic scapes are a culinary delight. They're kind of a delicacy and they're hard to find, and they're really only available for about 2 weeks. And they're expensive, so you should grow your own. I got my own this year and they were amazing. Um, so hardneck, so you might think, well, why don't you grow all hardneck garlic so that you get all scapes? Well, here's the thing. Hardneck will not keep for as long in your pantry as soft neck does. So I am right now I'm going through the hardneck garlic that I grew first. And then as we get further into winter and next spring, I'll be using the soft neck. So the soft neck creates no scapes, but it lasts longer in your pantry.
Okay, that's good
Okay?
to know.
Yeah.
So, this is kind of off topic. Well, not really, but so ha- with the Well, what's the average life of garlic after you picked it?
It can last, I would say hardneck, you're probably not looking at any longer than 3, maybe 4 months.
Okay.
And then soft neck should last you until you can harvest again in June.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then are you gonna do any type of minced garlic with those or
Well,
canning?
you could that's a great question. You can definitely do that. I have been so busy with the other stuff in my garden, I haven't gotten around to doing anything. I just let it dry, like I
Okay.
cured it.
Now do you hang that upside
Yep.
down? Okay.
No, you hang it by you just hang it by the foliage that's at the top.
Oh,
So it
okay.
looks kinda like an onion at the
Uh-huh.
top, like a green onion, and my husband put in some hooks for me underneath the shed, and so I just hung it like that,
Okay.
out of the sun, and it
Okay.
dried great, the paper hardened up, and it looks like store garlic, except it tastes much better,
Absolutely, and not all those nasty pesticides.
right? Yeah.
Okay, so are there specific steps to take for different types of gardens, like flower gardens versus vegetable gardens versus herb gardens?
So that is an awesome question. It's going to be a little bit of a short answer. I'm sure there's 1,000 things that you could say about this, but the one thing that I really want to get out there is make sure, yes. So there are some flowers that have like really picky tail things that you have to do to overwinter them, like roses. I think you cut off the flowers, but you don't do the pruning until spring, and there's all kinds of weird rules with some of these flowers.
Hmm.
I am very simple. The major specific step that I take with my veggies and herbs and flowers is that I harvest the seeds. So I want to make sure that I get seeds from like my calendula, from my lettuces, from my arugula, basil, all the herbs and stuff that I have grown. I want to make sure that I get seeds from and save those. So that's the big specific. And also the vegetables, you want to get seeds from those too.
All right, can't wait to learn how to do that
It's
because
so cool.
yeah. So ideally, when do you want to start winterizing your garden, and what
So
factors do you consider?
yeah. That is going to vary based on the plant. So there are sun-loving summer plants like tomatoes, summer squashes, that's like zucchini or those little yellow ones that you get at the grocery store. Um, what else? Certain peas, um, peppers, those are not going to survive a frost. So once it gets down to 32, 32 is not a hard frost, but it is a frost. So
Hmm.
all of those plants will become mush. So if you do not get every single thing off of there before your first 32 degrees, then they're going to be toast and you will get nothing else. Um, so you want to make sure that you keep an eye out beginning in September, especially like in Idaho and Colorado. You want to start looking for when your first frost date is. Now, a cheat for that is you've got to know your growing zone. So, for instance, I'm in zone 7A, and Ashley, what's your
5A.
zone? 5A.
5A.
Okay. So the lower the number, the shorter your growing season. So Ashley is at altitude. Gosh, our altitude here is like, I don't know, 3,200 feet. We're pretty low. Um, so get to know what your growing zone is. And Ashley found a really awesome map that has even microclimates on it, which is really important, because you might have some place within your zip code where they are in a different growing zone than you. And that really, really matters. So, growing zone is based on when your first frost and when your last frost dates are. So, figure out your growing zone, figure out when your last frost or your first frost date is in the fall, and then about 3 weeks before that, start watching the weather really, really close and see when your first frost date's going to be. Now, for other vegetables like celery, parsnips, carrots, um, winter squash, those and some green beans actually, they can tolerate down to 32. And actually, some of those root veggies actually taste better. Celery, I've heard, tastes better too. And I have a ton of celery out there
Mm.
after the first frost. So if you allow them, and it's called letting them be kissed by frost. So if they're kissed by frost, then they become sweeter.
Huh.
And so yeah, um, make sure that you know which veggies can tolerate being kissed by frost, and then you
And
leave
typically
those.
those are sometimes put on this even the seed packets,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I'll link that website that she mentioned that we
Awesome.
found, so you guys can see where your growing zone is. So, okay. So, what should gardeners do with their plants, such as the pruning, mulching, covering them, protecting them over the winter months?
hmm Um, well, so first of all, the I want to talk about perennials. So these are going to be things like your berry bushes. I am super super into growing plants for food, but also those plants that I just love for their beauty. So I do have some flower bushes and things that I love around here. Those are perennials. They'll come back year after year. My raspberries, blackberries. I have gosh, boysenberries and huckleberries, aronia berries, like they're currants. I have tons of berry. I know it's crazy, girl. I'm telling you, I lost my mind this year. But so all of these different berries and plants like that, they're going to come back. So what you need to do is Google is your friend when it comes to gardening. So see what needs to happen with your specific perennials. And I want to speak to berry bushes, because most berries will produce on second year canes. And I have seen, oh my gosh, I have seen these poor people post on Facebook gardening groups like, I have never gotten a raspberry. I planted raspberries 10 years ago, and these stupid things, they put out these canes and then I never get raspberries. Well, what they're doing, they the cane will grow and then they cut it off at the end of the season. What they don't know is that most raspberries produce on second year canes. So you have to leave those canes for the second year. Otherwise, you won't get any fruit at all. And so you've got to know what you have and what you're growing. Like I've got blackberries that will produce on first year canes, which is kind of unique. So I need to know when to cut and what to cut. And Google has been my friend there. Also, another thing that you can do is propagation. So I just purchased, actually, my mother purchased for me a little, it's not a butterfly bush, that's something else, but it's this little in-ground perennial plant that it's so beautiful. It looks like it's got these delicate little flowers that grow on these really long, spindly stems, and they look like butterflies. And so they look like little butterflies are hovering all over this little bush. It's just gorgeous. They're expensive. And so one of the little butterfly pieces fell off, and it was about, I don't know, a foot and a half to 2 feet long. And I was super sad about it. And then I thought, well, why don't I try to root it? So I put it in water and gave it some rooting hormone, and it grew tons and tons of roots. And so I just planted it. So now I have two. Uh,
That's
so
amazing.
yeah, so you can take, there's so many things that you can propagate. And fall is a great time to do that, to just like grow roots inside on parts of bushes or plants that you love, and then plant them for fall so that they have the winter to kind of be established, and then they're ready to roll in the spring. Also, I want to tell you, if you have a favorite pepper or tomato or rosemary bush, you can actually bring those inside and overwinter them. So, peppers and tomatoes take a while to get going in the spring. And if you have a favorite one that you love, and Ashley, for you, this would be super good for you because your growing season is short. So, and also you want hot peppers. So hot peppers take quite a while to actually turn their mature color. So you need that longer growing season. So what you can do is if you have a favorite pepper plant, you can cut them off to about 3 branches, pull them out of the ground very, very carefully, wash off all the dirt, put it in new sterile dirt and bring them inside, and they will overwinter beautifully. And then you can plant them in the spring, and you've already got a brand new plant, and you don't
Wow.
have to wait to grow it from seed.
So I would winter sow that this
Uh huh.
year,
Yep.
and then next year I would do that.
Yes. And so I'm going to try and do that if I have time, if I can get to it before the frost. I am gonna try to take one of my datil peppers and one of my, Aleppo peppers because they were unbelievable. I'm gonna try, oh, and a purple cayenne. Ken doesn't know
Mm.
there's all these plants coming inside, but,
The nice thing
yeah.
too about your house too is you have those big
Huge
windows,
windows, yeah.
so
Mhm.
you have a lot of light coming in.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and finally, okay, the last thing that you can do, and this is a great idea. I have not gotten organized enough to do this yet. I'm probably going to try it next year. But you can grow a cover crop on top of your dirt. So that helps, especially if you're doing in-ground gardening versus container or raised bed. Grow a cover crop like clover or radishes or field peas. Um, that will fix nitrogen in your soil. And then you can just like chop it off in the spring, or the winter will take care of it. But yeah, it will hold your soil, it will enrich it. It's kind of like adding compost.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
It's like a little science project out there.
Oh, yes, it is. Why I like it. This is exactly why I like it. Yes.
So, are there some best practices for cleaning and maintaining garden tools? And what equipment do you typically use in the off season?
Okay, first of all, if you are married and you have a husband at home, bring your tools inside because if you leave them outside to rust, he will want to kill you. Um, I am, I'm a little scatterbrained, and so yes, I have killed a shovel. I have killed a rake, and yeah, we've replaced several tools that I have left outside to rust. So bring them in all season
I mean, it's
long.
really the maker's fault for letting, like,
Yeah,
having a
well,
material that rusts.
that's really my thought, Ashley.
Yes.
So he got me a galvanized shovel now.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yes, thank you. So when it gets left outside, it's okay. But yeah, bring all your stuff inside because getting water on garden tools is just the kiss of death. The other thing is that you want to be, and I haven't been as fastidious about this. I was great about doing this with my fruit trees, but not with my plants. But you absolutely want to do this with perennials, something that's going to stick around year after year. Make sure, and I cannot stress this enough, this is probably the most important tip of this whole episode. Um, when you're pruning perennials that are going to come back year after year, make sure that before you move from plant to plant, clean off your blade with alcohol. So take rubbing alcohol and some paper towels or whatever out into the garden with you. And then as you move from like a peach tree to a plum tree to an apple tree, in between those, make sure that you clean and sterilize your blade. Even with bushes, like going from blackberry plants to raspberry plants, because you will carry disease from plant to plant and you will wipe out your whole entire garden. And those perennials, like, they take years to
Mhm.
produce. This is the 3rd year that I've had fruit trees, and we just finally got fruit on, like, 4 of the 12 this year. So, you definitely, all of the time and energy and investment that you put into perennials, you don't wanna lose it because you cross-contaminate.
That's a really good point because I had no idea.
Yeah, I didn't either.
So let's think about planting for next year.
Uh-huh.
What should we consider in terms of crop rotation and plant selection?
So that's an awesome question. Crop rotation is super important. Okay, so yes, all right. So it's super important except that I did read a couple of people who were saying that in raised bed gardens, when you're just a backyard gardener, like I'm not growing anything commercially, this is just for my family and my church and my neighbors and my friends. But that level of food production, they were saying you don't have to worry so much because you're amending with compost before you plant next year. So it really doesn't matter so much.
On the crop
However,
rotation?
yeah, so that may or may not be true for just backyard gardeners. But um, for me, it is important that I avoid as many plant diseases as I can, and some of those things overwinter in soil. And so I am going to practice crop rotation. And I will never have the same garden twice, probably. So next year I'll have to plan everything completely differently than this year. Um, and the reason is because I don't want diseases that might be left over in the dirt or bugs that might be left over in the dirt. I don't want them to have a substrate to feed on by planting the same things over and over. So
Okay.
I also want to say that it's a really great idea to rotate nitrogen fixers. Like, even if you decide that I'm not going to rotate plants, it's a good idea to rotate nitrogen fixing plants like beans and peas throughout your beds every year, because what they will do is really enrich your soil. Like, they will fix nitrogen into the soil that will feed plants that come along behind them.
Okay. So when you say you're not going to plant the same garden as next year,
Yeah,
you already talked about harvesting seeds. So are you talking about like in the same, you're not going to put the same plants in the same beds, you're going to
exactly.
rotate? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So I've
So
got
you'll have the same plants, but they won't
right.
be in the same location.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's why I have like 3 or 4 different areas where I have trellises. So things that need to climb, things that need space, they have 3 or 4 different places that I can plant them. So I'm just going to
Hmm.
rotate them around.
Okay. All right.
And another thing is like, if I guess another reason that I'm going to rotate is, yes, I will add compost, and yes, I amend my soil, but things like squash and tomatoes, oh, and garlic. Garlic is a super, super heavy feeder. These plants, they feed very heavily on the nutrients in the soil
Okay.
versus beans and peas, which add to the soil. Okay. So those other things extract nutrients that you have to then replace.
Ah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, so I said I'm going to add compost over the top. Now, I will add compost in the spring before I plant. I will buy bags of local compost here. And then I will add that over the top of my beds. However, before that, I will put leaf matter on top, and I use leaves from fall cleanup. So when you're raking leaves in your yard, and also there there is a growing consensus that leaving leaves in your yard is actually a really good idea, again because pollinators overwinter in this stuff. And so when you go through and rake all that stuff up, you're disturbing their homes. And
Hmm.
so now my husband will not be leaving leaves in the yard because he is just constitutionally unable to do it. So we have compromised, and I take all the leaves. He mulches them for me with there's an attachment you can get that will cut them up, right? In your
Hmm.
leaf blower. It will cut up all the leaves into teeny tiny pieces. And so I dump that all over the tops of my garden beds, and then it will decompose. Um, and then by spring, it's pretty well in there.
Yeah, and I believe, especially where I live, we have a ton of pine needles. You can do the same for pine needles. You can cut them up and stuff.
You want to be careful with pine needles.
Okay.
Pine needles are great for certain plants. Plants that require acidic soil, like berries, blueberries in particular, raspberries and blackberries and boysenberries and huckleberries, I believe, can handle some acid, but pine needles will break down into acid and they will make your soil more acidic. So you want to make sure that what you plant in a bed that has pine needles on it can tolerate a more acidic soil.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Look at all this stuff we're learning.
Look at all this stuff. I did learn something over the last year.
I don't know how you kept
Uh,
all of this in your brain while going to school
well,
and
this was the only
le-
thing I liked.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess you kind of already touched on this, but like what role does composting play
Okay.
with your gardening season?
So compost is amazing. Like I would not be gardening without it. And in my quest to be as self-sufficient as possible, I've been to a couple of composting classes and I joined a compost group on Facebook. And so I'm trying to learn everything I can, and you know, when I put my mind to something, I can generally get it done. But compost is hard. I have not figured this out. I don't know what the problem is. Leaf compost, I would highly recommend that. And I'm going to do some leaf composting this year too. Apparently, what you do with leaf compost, this is different. You put leaves from your yard into black garbage bags, and then you leave them in some spot where they can be just left out in the elements. Like you tie them closed, and they will compost down into something that looks like dirt, and it's very nutrient rich. It will take it like 2 years, I think, but you get really awesome stuff for your soil. And once you can get this started, then you can have compost every single year as you do it, right? But traditional compost where you just like take scraps and leaves and stuff from your kitchen and you put it on the compost pile, like, it's hard. It is really hard. It is a science that I have not mastered yet, and so I can't speak to how to do it. I have an area in my yard where I put all the scraps and everything, and it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, so I know something is happening, and maybe someday it will turn into dirt, but it's been 2 years, and I still don't know how to get this done. So, it's
So
hard.
those bins that you can buy
Yes,
that
I've had one of
rotate?
those. I've had one of those and it just, I don't know, it stunk and there was
Yes.
a lot of mold in there and you don't want mold in your compost. So that it looks easy. It looks super easy, but I didn't find that easy either.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you just buy yours.
So yes, I buy local compost. I support local composting people who are good at it because I'm not.
So, I'm just thinking of my situation where I'm several years behind you in the education department. So, what are some things that I and we as listeners that may not be gardeners can do over the next several months during the winter months to one gain more education, and then how can we even, as I'm thinking about where I'm going to place my garden next year,
Mhm.
like what kind of improvements can I do over the winter months to kinda get me a couple steps ahead before it's actually time to plant?
I love this question. This is, and this will get you excited about things too, because last winter was hard. I mean, after having a garden last year and then having to put everything away and get through those cold winter months, like I nearly died. So I think it's great. Seed catalogs are awesome to get a hold of and look through. They'll kind of feed your curiosity and need to learn. But then also, make sure that you get in touch before they close for the year, if they do. Make sure that you get in touch with some local nurseries, and see if they have some programs over the winter, because some of these local places, that's how they survive in the winter months, is they might have some classes you can go to. Um, Go to your county extension office, and you can find that online. So every county is going to have an extension office. That's where they do things like water testing, they do soil testing, lots of things that we need for garden, agriculture, yard, that kind of stuff. But they will have resources for you too. And in fact, a lot of extension offices here in Idaho will do like canning classes and things like that. So really helpful folks. And then also, many states have an agricultural school. So for instance, in Colorado, CSU is kind of the ag school, right?
Hmm.
And so most states will have a state university that is the kind of the ag school. So I would get in touch with that state university, kind of cruise around on their website, on their ag program website, and see if they have some local resources for people. And then finally, um, get to know small local farms, because these people, they are just honestly the salt of the earth. These are generally, I find that they are younger folks, like in their 20s, um or 30s, who have gone out and like decided that they want to farm. It's becoming a really popular thing to do, is to, kind of shrug off that corporate job and go and try and make a go of it, in agriculture, like really small scale agriculture. So I say support those folks. Maybe you can trade seeds with them. Like, for instance, there's a local farm that I bought some stuff from at our farmers market. And I was telling him about my datil peppers, which it's a very rare pepper. Um, and he was super interested. And I said, well, would you like me to bring you some so that you can have some seeds? And he was all about it. So I'm going to bring him some datils. And so he'll have those to grow for the farmers market for next year.
That's awesome.
So yeah, get to know these folks. Maybe you can trade seeds, maybe you can buy some of their produce, um, and learn from them.
Very cool. And then, same kind of thing goes into what can we do for the actual space that we're going to be planting our garden?
Yeah, that's huge. So figuring out like what's the best layout, where should things go. Um, Honestly, a lot of this is trial and error. You can certainly get online. There are lots of tools out there, that you can download. They're electronic. Um, so Ashley's kind of adept at like CAD designing and stuff. I don't do any of that. And so what I do is, so there are programs like that for people who are super spatial and like good at visualizing things. I'm not. So I just get grid paper and I divide my yard into sections. And then and actually what I did this year is I took a bunch of scratch paper, and like I made like a half sheet of 8.5 by 11 would be one garden bed. And so
Mm.
I had like 12 of those, and then I cut out circles for my round garden beds. And then I just literally wrote with a pencil what I was going to plant and where I was going to put it. And I numbered the garden beds, like, this is what I'm putting in 1 through 4. These are the ones on the side of the house. So yeah, I just do it
So
super
organized.
super old school. Well, yeah, I know. It's fun in the winter though, when you're just dying to get out there and it's cold and snowy.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. So can you recommend any specific plants or varieties that thrive in your region, and even my region, and should be considered for the next growing season?
you know, I don't want to get into specifics here because Every growing zone is so different. Like, for instance, between yours and mine, there is a multitude of differences in what you could grow versus what I could grow. I've got a longer growing season than you do. And so, like, Ashley and I were talking about finding her some hot peppers that she can grow for next year. And we're going to have to do some research because of her short growing season. We're probably going to I'm going to look into some hybrid options versus heirlooms, because
Mm.
I don't know if there are any heirlooms that will mature in the time that she's got for her growing season. So for anyone listening to this, I would just first of all figure out what you're going to eat. Don't grow stuff that you don't like, because there's nothing more frustrating than having like a bumper crop of something you hate. Um yeah, it's just an exercise in frustration. So first of all, figure out what you'll eat, then go research based on your growing zone. Like, I've got 120 days in my growing season. What can I grow? Like, if you love carrots, okay, what carrots will be good in my region? And then pick from that list.
Okay. And then with your vast 2-year experience,
Yes.
what
Ah,
kind of emerging trends or innovations in gardening have
oh,
you seen?
well, I mean, of course, anything I'm doing is gonna be no, but honestly, what I've seen, so there, gosh, people are doing amazing things with cattle panels. Like, they're forming trellises. I got in on that this year, and I put a bunch of trellises in my garden. So go on my Instagram if you want to see what some of those look like. um but yeah, just the aesthetics and the beauty of it, like what you can do with raised bed gardening is, I mean, it's unbelievable, and it really makes it a place where you can go out and just, it's not like you're standing in the middle of a cornfield, right?
Right.
It's actually a place of peace and solitude and beauty, and it's a place where you want to be. And then the second thing, as far as trends, I have to say this winter sewing thing, like, I am absolutely hooked. I will never try to grow. So there are two ways that you can grow your own plants to not have to purchase plants, which is really expensive. Um,
Hmm.
Two ways you can do it. One, you can plant them indoors in under grow lights. So you have to have grow lights. You have to have like a watering mechanism. You have to have so much equipment. And then it kind of can take over your house if you've got a lot of space to fill. But or you can start collecting milk jugs and do winter sowing, which is exactly what I did. I think I watered these things twice before it got to like spring slash summer. It was crazy what happened with winter sewing. So watch our episode.
Yes, because I'm not going to ask any more questions because I have a ton. Because
Oh
I'll
my
be learning
gosh,
right
it's
alongside
gonna
you.
be amazing.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Andrea, can you talk to us about like some personal experiences or stories from your own gardening journey? Like, what may have been like, what could be an inspiration for listeners that may be on the like more hesitant side to take
Yeah.
on a project such as a garden?
Yeah, so it's one, it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time. So because of that, you want to set yourself up for success as much as you can. And there are all kinds of memes going around about, somebody will have this beautiful tomato that they grew, and it's like, oh, it only cost me $246 to grow this tomato because, like, you have to buy the beds and you have to buy the dirt and you have to water and all your time. And yeah, so there definitely is that. But I would say, like, it gives you so much joy, and it's such a worthwhile hobby, that the upfront cost, you can do it on a budget and you can do it cheaply. So do that, get started. I have a major, um Yeah, fear of failure is probably the best way to put it. I it's hard for me to start something that may not work out. So this is one reason that I am not they call it a bench researcher. Like I did some research in college, and I don't like experiments that don't work out. Like, I can't spend years of my life and something's not going to work out. No, thank you. I need to succeed. So, gardening is hard. And this has helped me get over that fear of failure, um, because you never know what's going to happen when you put stuff in the ground. So,
Hmm.
in order to get over some of that, I would really encourage people to plant more than what you think you might want. So if you're looking at, oh, I'll have a couple of tomato plants. No, do 6 if you can, or do 4 if you can, if you got the space for it. Because, oh, and another thing is, I planted like 12 different kinds of melons because melons are my absolute favorite food to grow. And the reason is because if something doesn't work, then you always have a backup, right? Like,
Hmm.
if you grow tomatoes and beans and cucumbers and that's the only thing that you grow, well, if one thing doesn't work out, then a third of your garden just kind of stunk, and it makes it feel like it wasn't a worthwhile endeavor. So I planted more than I thought I should, and and it worked out great because I did have some things that failed miserably, but I was so excited about the things that didn't, that it didn't matter that some things failed. Also fertilize. You can't, this is not a thing where you can just put seeds in the ground and walk away. You must, you got to figure out the water situation, and you got to figure out the fertilizer. So,
Now, did you have a drip system?
yes. Oh my gosh, that saved everything. I put together giant drip systems in all of my raised beds. So worth the time investment to do it, because then I didn't have to water anything this year by hand.
Okay.
It's all on a timer. I did do some supplemental watering in the heat of the summer, but not much. And fertilizer, I like to use organic fertilizer like fish emulsion. There's an Alaska brand that you could just order from Walmart or Amazon or wherever, but it's a really good brand. Organic fertilizer will not burn your plants. So you don't have to worry about things like Miracle Grow or the fertilizer like that. That can really burn your plants and burn your leaves. So yeah, organic fertilizer is the way to go in my opinion.
Perfect.
And
And
then,
then, yeah.
oh, finally,
Mm.
um, I haven't figured out how to do this yet. I don't know how to do this. I can't thin plants because I can't kill anything that I have grown. They all become my babies, and so I cannot thin them out. But if you can do it, do it. Um, because yeah, give your plants space. So this is a problem with gardeners. You read on the back of the package that like one of these plants needs 2 feet. Like it really needs 2 feet. But no, I will put 6 into 1 foot and then, call it good because they're so tiny.
I know.
Yeah, but then they explode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so take that seriously if you can.
That's awesome.
And
Well,
that's it.
I learned a lot in this episode, and
Oh, good.
I hope our listeners found it enjoyable, but also educational too, because I'm excited. Like I'm definitely. It's daunting to think of all the work that needs to be done prior to
Oh,
my first
yeah.
garden, but I have been collecting my bottles.
Yay!
I can't remember how many I have so far, so I will be prepared
That's
when it is
awesome.
time to do my winter sowing, whatever that actually means when we get to that.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, I'm excited to get even if my garden is just one raised bed or one a few
Yeah.
containers, even like if we don't get to the raised bed building,
Mhm.
like just do some container gardens. I'm super excited to do that and just get my
Yep.
hands wet, if you will.
Yes.
Um, or dirty, I should say.
Dirty, very dirty.
Yeah.
Yep.
I will say the one thing I'm not looking forward to is the insects and probably more snakes. So,
Well, Ashley, they are our friends.
yeah. No, they're not. No. I know.
Oh,
I know.
you're gonna grow so much.
Yeah.
You saw the snake video I posted, right?
Yeah, and I
Okay.
said no.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh my
But we
gosh.
did have a gardener snake, 2 gardener snakes actually in our yard this
Okay.
year. And
They did
we
not
let
kill
we
you.
we let them be, and I don't know where they're at right now. I'm sure they scurried down the hill
Yep.
to get a little warmer for a little bit longer, but
Yep.
yeah,
That's
they will
awesome.
be probably in my garden next year.
And it'll be
So,
okay.
it will be fine.
Mhm.
Well, thanks, Andrea, for your knowledge in this
Of
area,
course.
and I hope our if you found this episode interesting, please let us know. Like, if this is
Yeah.
something that you want to hear more about, it won't be an every week thing. Don't worry about that. But maybe once a quarter, couple,
Yeah.
maybe 3 or 4 episodes a year where we're talking about gardens and
Mhm.
what we can do. And as I learn more about my region, where
Yeah.
some of our listeners are, then I can provide some of my knowledge that I've come across as I do my own little experiment. So,
Absolutely.
as always, if you found this episode interesting and enjoyable, please give us a 5-star review. Not a 4, but a 5.
Five.
Not a 4.5, a
No. A
5.
5.
Yes, and do that on whatever platform that you have are listening to. And then, as always, we love hearing from you guys. So please send us emails or shoot us a message
Questions.
on social media.
Mhm.
Our handles are going to be in the show notes, and then our email address is also down there. But it's askAApodcast@gmail.com. And then both Andrea and I have our social media accounts, so please give us a follow if you haven't already. And the best compliment that you can give us is honestly sharing these episodes with your friends and family. So,
Yeah.
if that is something that you would be willing to do, we would appreciate it. So, we will see you on the next episode and have a great rest of your day.
Bye. The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.